She was my line supervisor. As beautiful as she was on the outside, her words were full of venom. But I got in and immediately I started having issues with her. And she would be making fun of me. I went through this mental torture for months. But there was a day I decided that it must end. I'll start with a very unique story. When I started my career, I worked with a very beautiful lady. She was my line supervisor. As beautiful as she was on the outside, her words were full of venom. There was no encouragement whatsoever. That I asked myself several times if the Lord led me to that organization. I mean, this was a job that I'd prayed for, I'd asked the Lord for, and it was a miracle on its own. But I got in and immediately I started having issues with her. I mean, she would call me to be right in the middle of the office and she would be making fun of me, asking the other colleagues to share in the joke, telling them that I could not write an ordinary letter appropriately and that she did not understand why the organization employed me. I went through this mental torture for months, approximately 18 months. But there was a day I decided that it must end. I had applied for leave and rightfully approved. I'd done a proper handover to the officer working with me, and I proceeded on my vacation. Only for me to be recalled about 2-3 days later because she had gone to tell tons and tons of lies to the unit head. And so I received a call threatening that I would be sacked if I do not come back and finish my work, any abandoned work task, and then do a proper handover. I was so angry in my spirit because there were things I'd lined up for those few days. And I remember that as I received that call and I dropped, I called a friend, another senior colleague, and I said, what is it with your friend always after my throat? What exactly did I do to her? I have tried everything to please her and yet she wouldn't budge. But if her fear is that I take that seat from her, then I would take it. I'm sending you to her and I'm saying if her fear is that I take that seat and then I would take it and there's nothing she can do. She should realize that I'm the apple of God's eyes and she's not supposed to touch the apple of God's eyes. And so I dropped that call. And I was furious. I was praying. I was so angry in my spirit. And I said, Lord, this is the last I'm going to allow this. How come I did not understand that I was the one allowing that before now? So to cut the long story short, I went back to work like 2 days after to try and explain myself. And then the head of unit said, why? So I'd taken my daughter with me, who wasn't feeling well at the time. And then I said, why are you bringing your daughter? I said, she's not feeling well. And I said, okay, no, that I can go proceed on my leave, but I should just do a proper handover. And I explained myself that I'd done a proper handover and that the officer I handed over to had all the information. Then he asked me to call the officer. So I called the lady and she explained that she had all the information. And then he was wondering, so how come I got this story? How come what I'm hearing is something else than what you're saying? I said, well, I don't know. By the time they called my line supervisor, she was torturing. She could not really say anything. And so, but the boss just apologized to me, gave my daughter money. I didn't have money for vacation before. My daughter collected enough that day and I proceeded on my vacation. And guess what? About 2 weeks after that, I resumed. And then in the course of that week, a lot of people were let go in the organization, and she was the very first. And then people started wondering, this girl said this, and it's happening. What's going on? That was when I realized that God was expecting me to take a step, but I wasn't the one taking it. I mean, I'm the apple of his eyes. Whatever I decree on earth shall be established in heaven. But I had waited for so long. Maybe you're like a Moses or like me in this matter. And God is saying, why are you crying to me? I gave you a rod. Stretch your rod against the waters. And immediately he did that. And the entered, the Red Sea parted way. But you're waiting and crying and saying, God, you're seeing me. God, when would you come to? God is saying, you take your stand. Stand in that position and that authority that I've given you and decree the outcome. outcome. So you may be telling yourself, I'm in a toxic environment. You allowed it. You may be telling yourself, oh, there's the latest what now? Mental issues, so that nothing affects my mental issue. And God is saying, you have my word. I'd given you promises. I told you explicitly, the Lord led me to that organization. So even though the Lord had led you there, that toxicity could still happen, but you will need to take a stand. So dear child of God, think about these things that I've said, irrespective of where you find yourself. Seek God. Know that is what God is saying, and then speak the word. Take a stand. Take a stand. The devil needs to see you take a stand. I pray for you today that your eyes will be opened, the light of God's word, and you'll take a stand against that negative situation. When our destinies want to move forward, some Herods and some Pharaohs need to be cleared out of the way, but you have the responsibility to clear them out of the way. Hi, everyone. My name is Phoebe, and I'm the convener of Marketplace Vessels Conference biannual event. Before the recently concluded conference, the Lord has been nudging me to share my stories. And I believe as someone that has spent over 20 years in the corporate circle, we have stories that you can resonate with. I have stories. And I believe that as I share the stories, that you would recognize the things the Lord would have you do, either as a corporate person, a professional, an entrepreneur, or a leader. I believe that the Lord would speak to your heart, the things that you need to do in this season. I'll title this next set of series as a chronicles of my journey in the workplace.